Well, good evening, Hollowell. It's Tuesday evening, and we trust you've had a good start to your week. Tuesdays are going to afford us the opportunity to have a continuing look at what we focused on the previous Sunday. And so I'm looking forward to that. One of my professors used to call the concept of what we're doing basket of leftovers, and he was using a metaphor that was derived from the feeding of the 5,000 as Jesus was taking and distributing physical nourishment. He would inevitably have leftovers, 12 baskets full, and we want to make sure that nothing goes to waste, even as Jesus instructed the disciples to make sure nothing goes to waste. And so with the spiritual leftovers, we want to take a look on Tuesday evenings at some of the things that maybe we didn't have an opportunity to talk about on Sunday morning. Inevitably, that usually takes place because of time constraints. And so we're going to glean a little bit. We're going to go a little bit deeper on some level and take a look at the passage that we had on Sunday morning, taken from Mark chapter 4. Back in the 1990s, Cindy and I and our family would go to a place in Northern Ontario known as Camp Mishawon. We directed camps there throughout the 1990s. 29 one-week-long camps in all, with kids who were aged 8 through 15. And for 3 weeks out of every summer, that was part of our ministry, and we looked forward to it. And God really met with us in that time, and met with a number of not only the kids that were going to camp, but all of our staff as well. We had senior staff, and then we had about 30 counselors at every camp. Round Lake is the lake that Camp Mishawon is situated on. It's near Killaloe, Ontario, and it's not as large as Galilee or the Sea of Galilee, but it is about 5 miles in diameter. And it does have some characteristics that are somewhat similar to the Sea of Galilee. On that particular lake, there is an area where there is probably a convergence of currents, and there is a disparity in depth, and there can be turbulent waters that develop that aren't immediately visible to the naked eye while you're standing on shore. We call it the Point. And so on one July morning in the early 1990s, I decided that it would be nice to go out on the water. The waterfront staff had told me, take one of the stern drive boats. We had 2 of them that were rescue boats. Take one of them out and just simply enjoy and relax and get away and be refreshed and renewed. And apparently that's what water people do. I should have known that that's not what land people would appreciate doing. And I tend to be, as I shared with you on Sunday morning, a landlubber, a land person. And unless I have an ability to touch the bottom, or if I have a life preserver of some sort with me or on me, my single thought that goes through my mind from the time I enter the water is, when can I get out? And so even though I was supposed to relax and was enjoying for a period of time that relaxation, it quickly became evident to me that not everything that seemed to be peaceful and calm on shore was so once you got out on the water. I did have a complicating factor as well. Jacob, our eldest son, was probably 3, maybe 4 years old at the time, and I thought he would enjoy some quality time with his dad, and so we had put a life preserver on him And then we had put them in the bow of the boat, the front of the boat, and we headed out together. And it seemed, as I said, that things were going along quite smoothly. I was able to look back at the camp and know that any of the stresses that I was having were left behind, and there was an opportunity for calm and peace. But when we reached the point, we found that there was turbulence that was creating waves on the surface that were probably upwards of 2 feet. And there was a sense of panic that came over me, and actually over Jacob. It was visible on his face. He had trusted Dad, knew that he could always count on Dad for safety and security, but the look that was on his face betrayed the fact that things were not going very well. And I'm sure the look on my face betrayed the same thing. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't skilled in how to manipulate or maneuver a watercraft. And so I decided to do what I felt was best, and that was to go directly into the waves and then try and run parallel to them. And I did that 2 or 3 times, and then would do it again another 2 or 3 times until finally we escaped and we were able to get out on some placid water and head towards shore. And I can tell you that I was never so relieved. I had been not only fearing for my own life, but fearing for the life of my little son. I had told him to hang on tightly to anything he could, but of course they were aluminum molded seats, so there wasn't even a ledge for him to hold on to. I remember feeling helpless and hopeless, and I remember trying to remain calm, but not doing a very good job of it. And when I prayed and pleaded with the Lord and then decided to take that venture into the waves to try to make my escape, as I said, I was never so relieved to be on the other side. I headed for shore and was so grateful for the Lord's deliverance and for his protection. It was something the likes of which I had never before experienced, quite frankly. That was my little storm with my little son. I can't imagine what it must have been like for the fishermen who were seasoned as men who had been out on the Sea of Galilee to have a storm that arose that threatened their life, that threatened their existence. They had seen storms happen on this particular lake many times, but this one struck fear in their heart in a manner that they had never before experienced. Listen to what verse 35 of that passage says in Mark chapter 4. That day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him, and a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. 3 things I want to point out very briefly to you tonight. Things that are leftovers that we didn't get a chance to look at on Sunday morning. And what they are is 3 movements or a progression in this story that the author, Mark, is very clear about. And I want you to see it as well. The first one is a furious squall. Verse 37 says, there is a perilous situation, a perilous position that the disciples find themselves in. And they're in danger of losing their lives, and it's evident to all of them. This is not an existential threat. This is not a matter of perception. This is a matter of fact. This is something that each of them could see in their circumstances. It wasn't based on interpretation. It wasn't based on the way he saw things or she saw things. All of them knew that their lives were very much in danger and that they were dependent upon someone or something beyond themselves. They could not control their circumstances. And it couldn't have come at a worse time. It was night. They were all exhausted. Jesus was asleep in the bow of the boat. or the stern of the boat, and they didn't know what to do or where to turn. And storms are often like that in our lives. We are uncertain who we should turn to or where we should go to find help in time of need. My third son, Caleb, graduated college a number of years ago and decided that he would join the Peace Corps before he went to medical school. And he was just weeks away from departure to Liberia when he was disappointed to hear the news that the Ebola virus had come upon that land in a mighty way, and things were being locked down, and there was a temporary world lockdown in some regards, not the likes of which we see now, but nonetheless, there was a great sense of fear and panic that was taking place. He wasn't able to go to Liberia to represent his country with the Peace Corps. They got in touch with him and said that in a number of months he would be able to go to another African country on in October. And as that date neared, there was civil strife and unrest in that particular country. And again, as we got to the date, he was not allowed to go on his assignment. Third one's a charm, you would think, at least. And so the Peace Corps got in touch and they let him know that they would send him to another place that is well known for good, not good times, but a good example of how we can be a positive influence in our world. And so he was looking forward to that. It was the tiny South Pacific nation of Vanuatu that he was to go to. And so in January, he shipped out. And after just a few months of his placement there in Vanuatu, there was a building typhoon that was taking place. And it was bearing down on, of all places, Vanuatu, this string of islands. And sure enough, he had to be evacuated, and of all places to be completely devastated, his tiny island and one other one, Tana, that he was on, was completely almost obliterated. The vegetation was gone. The housing, the minimal housing that was there was gone. The people had been devastated. And so he returned home. His plans had been once again thwarted. His plans had been devastated. And I know that some of you have felt at times as though your plans are being preempted. You've felt like nothing seems to be going right, and there's a storm that follows a storm that follows another storm. And certainly as I look at Caleb's life, I can see that and acknowledge that oftentimes we're not able to control the circumstances that we face. And of course, in Caleb's situation, he's graduating this year. He's finished medical school. And one would expect that you would have your ceremony to congratulate the class and have your pomp and pageantry. But we received word not long ago that because of yet another storm that is raging, the coronavirus storm, there will be no graduation ceremonies for these doctors. In fact, they will be placed in their residencies in a more immediate fashion, but all of the ceremonies will be suspended and actually have been canceled. And so just when you think things are going to take a positive turn, there can be another storm that happens. We're not in complete control. We're not able to make judgment calls that ultimately will provide us with the desires of our heart. And I know that some of you are experiencing storms in your life right now, and even beyond the uncertainty that the coronavirus provides. I want you to know, though, that there is some good news that can be had, and we find it in our passage here. And we didn't get a chance to look at it because of all of the different things that we could look at in this passage. But tonight we look at it. Not only is there this tremendous storm that is taking place, but the author then says that there is also a perfect peace that happens from a terrible storm that terrifies those who are followers of Jesus to an incredible calm. Jesus in verse 39 gets up, rebukes the wind, and says to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, and we read, it was completely calm. Completely calm. From a raging and violent storm that threatened even seasoned sailors to suddenly a quiet calm. Jesus is capable of providing perfect peace. Even when we think that we are being overwhelmed by a devastating storm or unpredictability or things that are unexpected and devastating, we can turn to Jesus even as the sailors did and find that he has the capacity, that he has the ability to bring a perfect peace, a complete calm. We know that the world looks at the coronavirus situation and there is tremendous panic. But for those of us who are believers, we know that Jesus provides us with a perfect peace. And there's no reason for us to fret and to fear when the Father who was watching over Jesus while he was in the boat is the same Father who is watching over us while we face the storm. The Father of Jesus was able to provide assurance of passage to the other side in a way that I never could for my little son when we went out on a lake many years ago. It was well beyond my capacity to do so. I would have loved to be able to say, "Jacob, don't worry, everything is going to be fine." The truth of the matter was, I didn't have any idea what I could do or what I was doing. Jesus knew when he set out that the Father would continue to look after him regardless of the circumstances that he would face when he was traveling to the other side. And while the others panicked, Jesus was quietly and confidently asleep in the back of the boat, in the stern of the boat. It's only when we turn to Jesus that we can know the complete calm, the perfect peace that he brings about when he stands up and calms the storms. Which brings us to our third movement and final movement, and it's this. There is a holy fear that is also mentioned here. Verse 41, this is the third movement in the story. They were terrified, and they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Now, remember, these are the people who knew him best. These are the people who had been walking with him and talking with him and living with him and witnessing his power. And yet they seem to have forgotten the way that Jesus had done so many different things, healing the sick, setting the captives free, those who were demon-possessed, and the list would go on. And when they saw him doing this miracle, when they saw him bringing about this perfect calm, this perfect peace, they didn't respond with a rousing cheer. They didn't respond with a first century rendition of, "We are the champions of the world." They responded with holy fear. That's something that's missing in our culture and in our world today. We have a tendency to think of Jesus as God. "You believe in God, believe in me also," Jesus said in John 14. And we're willing to do that. But we aren't willing to accept the implications of that. The fact that ultimately, that means we ought to be on our knees before Jesus. We have a tendency instead to think that Jesus is our buddy and that Jesus has to allow us to call the shots and to do the things that we want to do. If we want to disregard his word, he has to accept it. If we want to be prodigal with his love expressed to us, he has to bear that. That's not the case. If we want to acknowledge the power that Jesus has in the face of the storm, if we want to seek his blessing so that he can bring peace to us when we need it most, we also must acknowledge a reverential fear for him. And as we make our way through this very difficult time in human history, let's be mindful of the events of Mark chapter 4. And when we face unexpected and overwhelming and difficult circumstances, let's remember that we can turn to Jesus for a perfect peace and a complete calm. But remember as well that it comes with the recognition and the gratitude that he is who he claims to be, God made manifest here on the face of this earth. He is co-equal with God the Father and God the Holy Spirit. And so that ought to strike a note of holy fear in our hearts, as well as gratitude, because the Father who is capable of keeping us in the boat as we pass through the waves is the same one who has given his Son command over the vessel. May the Lord bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you.